if you're an Enneagram 8, you might be a sociopath. I mean, you might. I don't know for sure. I'm an Enneagram 8. Maybe I'm a sociopath. Let's talk about this. I think a lot of people, myself included, have struggled to understand what sociopath means as opposed to psychopath. So we're not talking about someone who's like the crazy person and they've gone insane and they're, oh, watch out for them. Like, let's make a horror movie out about these people. More so a sociopath is going to be much more subtle. It's manipulation. But I can see how we can look at the Enneagram 8 personality and it's kind of already got the markers built into it, which is why I think so often we see in movies and TV shows why Enneagram 8s end up being easy villains. It's just easy to write them as villains more so than to write them as the heroes. I mean, that's kind of a stereotype at this point. So what I want to do is just, let's look at what are some of the signs of a sociopath and let's connect it to Enneagram 8. And again, I am Enneagram 8, so I'm not putting anybody down. I'm kind of going through this myself, making sure I'm not one myself. Signs and traits of a sociopath: a hunger for power and dominance, devious or deceptive tendencies, ruthlessness in the pursuit of their goals, hostile or aggressive towards others, easily angered or irritated, irresponsible decision-making, emotional detachment, social deviance. Now, as I read that definitely sounds like, quote, an unhealthy Enneagram 8, specifically 8 wing 7, specifically sexual subtype, specifically what I am. I am Enneagram 8, wing 7, sexual subtype. And I would say this presents itself quite nicely to line up with the signs of a sociopath, because we know that Enneagram 8s we're the control freaks. We don't want anybody telling us what to do or trying to control us. We want to be in control of everything we actually can have control over. You know, and I've struggled with that my whole life, but as I get older, I'm like, okay, here's 99% of things on in life I can't control, but here are a few things I can control. So in a healthy way, let me focus on those. But this idea of like basically being deceptive and like kind of like this dark energy, and I've always kind of operated where let me learn what the rules are so I can get around the rules. Not necessarily break the rules, but like you can't really hold me back by rules. If I'm not breaking a law, if I'm not going to get in trouble, there are not consequences. But I think in an unhealthy way, someone who is a sociopath isn't even going to worry about those rules. They're not going to worry about the consequences. So I think very easily someone who is my type of Enneagram could end up on that path quite easily. It mentions emotional detachment, and I can relate to that to some degree, because I'm the kind of person where if I trust you and you're in my circle, I protect you. I take care of you, and I expect you're going to take care of me. But I largely don't trust people, and most people are not in that inner circle. So I am emotionally attached to most people in that way, because if I'm emotionally invested in someone, then they have some kind of power over me, and I'm not going to allow for that to be the case. It mentions easily irritated or angered. You know, that's what Enneagram 8s are all about. We are very impatient, and we are going to be noticeably bothered by things probably quicker than most people. So as we look at all these, we see this really matches up to Enneagram 8. And I think that's why I wanted to make this video, because I acknowledged that if anybody on paper is lined up to be a sociopath, it is me. Thing is though, I've been married for nearly 17 years. I have 2 kids. Like I have a steady job. Like I have a very normal life, you know. I live in a nice neighborhood in a normal house, and like I have a completely normal life. So it's just interesting because we're portrayed as the villains often. And granted, I have the best parents. I was surrounded by a good community growing up, and I chose the discipline that the Bible teaches. So I think even having that mindset. But I think had I been raised in a different home, it could have been a lot different. And I think certain people are more prone to, end up in criminal activity or self-destructive behavior. I would say if you're Enneagram 8, wing 7 sexual subtype, you've kind of already got odds going against you. Like, you're more likely to end up in some tough situations there. However, if that energy can be channeled in the right way, you can be a very strong, powerful, empowering person who other people depend on for stability. Fortunately, that's where I'm at. But believe me, it's not lost on me that had I been raised by different parents in a different town, had things been different growing up, this nature versus nurture. I mean, I'm telling you, nature, I'm like, just add water and I'm a psychopath or a sociopath. Just add water, here's your sociopath, okay? But the nurture side of it, I feel kind of moved the river, as I would like to say. That's quoting the Wallflowers. I moved the river. I took all of this thing that could have happened and I tilted it, and now it can be a good thing and I can be a normal human being. Little does anybody else know, I'm just one pivot away from being a sociopath and, being this villain. But instead, I'm not. And I want to close on this. I've mentioned this many times. I think it's interesting that in movies and TV shows, we rarely see the villain redeemed in the end. Very rarely. Often what we see is they either end up in prison or end up dying. There's no path to redemption for the villain, especially not an all-powerful Enneagram 8 villain. It's just very uncommon. We always see that ending in demise, and I think that makes more sense in our brains. But there are a few exceptions where the villain does end up redeemed, and they're not necessarily Enneagram 8, but my point being, we can look at Gru and Despicable Me, we can look at the Grinch, we can look at Darth Vader, that in the end, they chose the path of redemption instead of choosing to remain on the dark side. And I think for someone like me, that's more obvious. For somebody like me who has all the wiring to be this villainous character, and I still kind of like identifying with that. What's funny is I would drive a Jeep and the spare tire cover is the Death Star. And then the taillight covers are stormtroopers. And my license plate cover, it says welcome to the dark side. And that's a decision I made years ago. My Jeep is all black, so it's like Darth Vader. So there is this idea intrinsically in me that keeps attaching to the antisocial, countercultural concept that I don't need to be seen as the hero. I'm okay being the villain. I'm okay being the person who's dangerous. And that's something I feel comfortable with. But at the end of it, I think, but that's not really who I've chosen to be. I've chosen to be a good moral person despite all odds and despite my dark tendencies. So, can you relate? Would you like to add to that? Your comments belong right here.